So welcome everyone to Let's Break It Down for You. It's a podcast series I'm doing to try and help explain things in perhaps a simpler way and give you some background information about myself. So this is our first episode, and I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Jane Beekbane, who's going to be we're asking me some questions about my background. So I hope you enjoy this, and please continue to follow us in the podcast series.
So hi, it's Jane, and I'm really happy to be here with Leah, my friend, who I met over 7 years ago at a coffee party. So it's great for everybody to get to know her like I do.
Great. Thanks, Jane. So do you have questions?
I do. I got to know you and came out to canvas for you because I really loved what you had to say, what you stood for, and I think everyone else listening should have that opportunity. So who's the real Leah?
It's the person you see. Like, I'm pretty real. I'm not a great politician, as I say to people, and I should never play poker because I don't hide my emotions very well. But I think a lot of who I am is, like all of us, we have our journeys, we have our backgrounds, the things that we have influenced us, and that creates who we are today. And so I'd say today I'm a very passionate, committed person, and committed to our community, to making sure there's great representation, and committed to our country to ensure that Canada remains the best country on the face of the earth, which I believe it is. And I think, we have a lot of challenges, but that just means we have people who have to work really hard.
Leah, I've had the great opportunity of meeting your family, particularly your mom and your dad when we first started out. And they are well loved in the community. And why are the roots and where you came from important, and how has it shaped you?
Well, I think like all of us, Jane, like you, the way you grow up, the values you grow up with are so important. And, my parents were a pretty typical Canadian story, right? My mother immigrated from Holland, first boat after World War II, came over with her family. She has 6 brothers and sisters. And, immigrant family, farm. She became a nurse and worked up in Moose Factory, actually. And she met my dad up there. My dad was a young man. Again, his parents had immigrated, so he was first-generation Canadian born. But, they also came from a very working-class background. And my dad had to, well, at the time he met my mom, he hadn't yet gone back to school. I think my mom was partially for that. I can thank her for that. But really bright man. And so he went back to school part-time while he was working. He's been an entrepreneur. And I think part of the reason he did that was because he was so involved with community, and so was my mother. It gave him more flexibility to do other things. And so I had, an example of parents who worked hard to get where they were, that didn't prioritize money or wealth. They really prioritized community involvement and contributing and raising us, like everybody. But our family didn't stop at myself and my 3 siblings. It went beyond that. There was always people over at my house. My parents were always caring for people. They started a lot of different groups and organizations. And anytime, even when I was at college, people would come home with me and they'd be welcome because people shouldn't be on their own at holidays. And so I think that kind of, being raised in that environment. And the interesting thing was my mother was coming from Holland, Dutch Reformed. I went to a Christian school for the first 8 years of my life. And those values, I think, also informed my kind of commitment to helping community and helping people. My dad was Catholic, so I kind of was raised.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I was kind of raised in my grandparents, who I was very close to, or obviously were Catholic. So I was kind of raised in a family where there was not one religion, and then that even got broader because studying world religions, understanding other backgrounds, other people was always really important to me. But it was always about community, faith, helping others. It was the tenets of all of those kinds of religions and backgrounds that were important.
One of the images I have, and it's so ingrained in my mind, is before your swearing-in ceremony. Your dad was sitting across the table in the office from you, and he was helping you. I think you were reaching out to him. And I remember that respect and you looking up to a man that was so loved in the community, that had been the mayor in Newmarket. And I thought, wow, aren't you lucky to have those roots and those people there. Yeah. Can you share a story growing up of either you're out in the community or sort of what made you tick to make that change to say, hey, I want to go into politics?
Well, I think growing in a political family, as you said, my dad was mayor for quite a while, but that he was 40 years in public service. He was a mayor for the last part of that, I think 6 or 8 years, but was always involved as a counselor. But also, he was involved with community living, York Region from the start. He was one of the founders of In From the Cold, the homeless shelter. My mom was always involved with the Heart and Stroke in her church, and as I say, welcoming anybody into our house. They were both so involved, and I have to say, as soon as you talk about my dad, who I do obviously love very much as a father, but also respect greatly as a person, he would be the first to say, but your mother was just as much a part of it. And he's right.
Great.
It was always about the two of them working together and the value of what, at that time, women in a more traditional role added, and how she supported my father, enabled him to do what he did, and was in her own right a community leader as well. So I had that, and my grandmother as well. So I think I had that modeling on both sides. And of course, I was the second of 3 girls before a boy came along. My brother John, who's now mayor in Newmarket. But so it was all about women too. We were going to be the ones who did things in the community, who were there. And so I'll just tell you 2 quick stories growing up that come to my mind, because my dad was always an environmentalist as I am, and we always cared about the natural world as well as people. I'd say people were first, and then our environment. And I remember we would go out for the Ferry Lake cleanups, and it was every year in the Holland River. And this was before it was all cleaned up and beautified. That was something my dad did as mayor. But before, and I remember going in with big boots on and trying to pull shopping carts out of the river. And I was young, and we would all go out together. It was our family outing, right? Or we'd go and we'd go and help at an event like Voices of Joy, which is something that I was involved in singing. It's a choir for people of all abilities. Well, I had a cousin, Gwen Vanderkoy, who was a wonderful woman. But from the time, she was just a little bit younger than me, but growing up, she had developmental disabilities. And so she was involved in community living and the Voices of Joy and different things. And so I had a firsthand experience of joining with the family and working together to support Gwen and her parents, who were my godparents. We're just a very close-knit family. We did so many things that were, community focused.
And I know you're very passionate about that, because when I accompany you, those are dear to your heart, and you are always looking to go back to your roots. Mm-hmm. Leah, you people know you as a very successful businesswoman. And you don't get to be a successful businesswoman without a lot of hard work and education growing up. And there's a rumor out there that you held 3 part-time jobs while attending Harvard. And I think people don't know that about you. And I think it would be great to sort of explain your educational journey after high school.
Yeah, thanks. Well, as I said, I went to a Christian school for 8 years, and then I went to the local public school, Newmarket High, where my father had gone before me. And it was a great school. I always actually wanted to be challenged more. And so I would have liked to have gone to private school for my last year, but we couldn't afford it, which was fine. I just did different things and worked hard. I also had jobs during high school. But after that, I applied to different colleges. I think my parents wanted me to stay in Toronto, and I kind of wanted to go further away. So I applied to Trinity College thinking I wouldn't get into Trinity. That was my plan, but I did. So I went to U of T first. It was a great experience. And I think we have amazing, educational institutions in Canada. We're so lucky. And you get accepted based on your merit. Maybe it's not always exactly fair the way it's done, but it's not based on money anyway. And then I finished there. I went to, directly from U of T, from Trinity, I was accepted into a program I really wanted to go into at the Kennedy School at Harvard. And that was a joint program where I studied international finance and development. It was a lot about public policy, something that I was interested in from both the development side and the finance side, because I'd done a lot of business. My dad was an accountant. That's the way my brain works, I guess, too. So yeah, I went there, but it was, it was hard. Like my godparents helped, my parents helped. I got a few scholarships, but even so, it was very expensive, and I had to work hard. I worked, like I said, I had 3 part-time jobs. I was an assistant to the dean of the law school there, and I still remember her name, Mary Upton. She wanted me to go into law. She wanted me to stay. And I said, I can't afford to do any more after this degree. I have to get out and work. But it was a great experience.
And I think, you know that education is so important, and our government is so behind funding people in education. Yeah. I remember when you first got elected and you got a call from somebody that you had worked with in, I think it was your first job, who said, Leah, when you arrived at your first job, you always said to them, and I think I'm not sure you were in your 20s, that you always wanted to be in politics. You wanted to give back. You wanted to serve. Yeah. So in our riding for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, we have many opportunities to serve people. And we get pulled in very many directions. And we sometimes have to choose what we're going to champion. So what do you think are the greatest causes that we need to champion in our riding to help serve others?
It's a great question, Jane, because you've been so involved. There's way more than we can ever do, and I'm and everybody on my team. I have an amazing team, including you and Moeen Hamir, who are here, and Sarah, and so many people that help in our office. But we do have to make decisions, and it's tough because we all care deeply for every person that we interact with. I do, and it keeps me up at night sometimes, just thinking about how can we do more, how can we help people, and we have to look at, I'd say one of the most important things for me, and one of my commitments when I ran, was that I really believed that good representation for the riding was so important, that making sure people knew who their member of parliament was, that they could speak to us, that they could reach out. It was one of those essential things for democracy. And I was always worried that if government wasn't relevant to people, then people were going to take democracy for granted and not be engaged and not be part of it. And democracies don't just happen. Like, they take engagement from people to be part of it. So really representing the community, listening to people, meeting with people, going to events. And I think sometimes, I'll get chided and say, oh, you're just there for a photo op. And it's like, I'm never there for a photo op. We take photos to make sure people understand we're out there, but I'm there to listen to people.
And to support. And, I've stood on many a corner with you holding up a sign for the environment. So can you speak a little bit about that to the people that are listening, why that's important?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in activism. I do believe it makes a difference when people speak up, speak out. And I've had that kind of background where I've always been involved in active and the women's movement, environmental movement, and other things. So when people are out and they're passionate about a cause that I believe in strongly, I'll join them. Like, I'll come out. It's like I say, I'm not the best politician, because maybe you're not supposed to do that kind of thing, but it matters, and our community is working for these things, and for me, it's important. Even things like, for example, the Women Life Freedom Movement. We have so many people from the Iranian community in Richmond Hill and Aurora, and this continues to be, and was a very important thing for them, issue for them, and I feel strongly about it too. So for me, joining people at these rallies or walking in demonstrations or being part of a community who is trying to make change is really important.
Well, I think some of the causes that we're trying to put forward, like childcare, that are affecting a younger population, and I don't think they realize that, they're paying a reasonable amount, and if that's taken away from them, then they're going to be forced to pay, possibly $2,000 a month in childcare. Yeah. And these young people have mortgages, and therefore parents like us may be having to support them. So why is that so important, that cause that you fight for?
Yeah, and it's interesting, Jane, because you talk about childcare, which is so important for so many reasons, but it's also an affordability measure. And I know, you do certain things in the riding, and there are certain specific riding issues, and then there are things you do as a member of parliament to advance good policy, good legislation that supports all people in your riding. And clearly, over the last few years, and since really going through COVID, affordability, in interest rates, food price inflation, all of that has been so important. And so as a government, as a member of government, I have been working on issues that I think affect most people, as well as these specific issues I've talked about, because that's if you want to say the bread and butter, but I don't mean it in terms of earnings, I just mean it in terms of the basic things that everybody's concerned about. So, and to speak of childcare, as I say, it's a crossover point because, 50 years ago, Jane, over 50 years ago, the first report from the National Committee on the Status of Women came out. And one of the recommendations it was a universal child care program to help women.
Which is so needed. It's
So needed. It was needed then, 50 years ago.
No.
And, there were two attempts. One where we got very close, where Ken Dryden, I believe, was the minister responsible. And then the Conservatives were elected and they canceled the program. And we were just about to cross the line, and that was back in the early 2000s, Jane. And so now for me to sit in that house when this piece of legislation was enacted, when we've actually put in place a program that is not only affordability measure for young people, but it's also an equality measure. Because not only the women have more of an equal opportunity to advance, but the children. Early learning and childcare development is so important.
One of the things that when we're out and about, people come up to us and they say, Leah is probably the hardest working politician. She's everywhere. She's supportive, particularly the women. Whenever we go to events, women want to be a part of you because they see what you're saying on the Hill. They see what you're advocating for. And why is it so important, particularly today, why women's rights are so important?
Well, there's so many layers to that, Jane. And first of all, I have to start and say that I'm really grateful to the people of Aurora, Richmond Hill for giving me this opportunity, for putting their trust in me. And I feel it's a responsibility and obligation to do as much as I can. I mean, to put forward issues, to support people. So I work as hard as I can, and I'm very grateful to my amazing team, without whom I could not do any of this. So it's a team effort. But the reality is that I came into politics when my youngest daughter was 18. That was the first time I ran, and I did it because I felt that I had the time and the energy, and I still feel like that. I have the energy and the time to really commit myself fully to this. And for me, it's not a job, it's a calling. It's a kind of something where I feel it's so important, so vital. And I do it for not just my kids, not for the future, but for all of us and for women. And growing up in an era like you did, where certain things we didn't take for granted,
No.
I mean, before 1988, I believe it was, abortion was illegal, right? Morgenthaler was thrown in jail. Like there were things where women didn't have access to certain career opportunities. They didn't have access to certain health care. They were definitely, when you look at wages and equality, paid far less than men. And we've made up a lot of that gap. We still have a ways to go.
But we're fighting it and we're trying to move forward, I think. And I think when you look at the younger generation and particularly the young women that have the opportunity to go out and now get any job that they want, and they don't have to hide that. And back in my day, I worked in advertising. There were certain accounts that women were never allowed on because it was a typical male.
Yeah.
So what's a typical...
But Jane, let me interject for a minute because I don't think that's completely gone. I would say that. I think, we've made a lot of progress, but we need to sustain it and we need to move forward. Right. This is the issue right now, is that I think people are a little complacent. They're looking and going, oh, we're in a good spot. Like Canada's, we're pretty... But look around the world. Yeah. Look at just to our south, the United States, what's happening with people's rights. Look at what's happening in Afghanistan, Iran, right. Israel. You can look at so many countries around the world right now, Jane, and see this backlash. And when this backlash begins, it begins with women. Right. It begins with women. When this really extremist views on things or this anger about what's happening, it's women who are the ones who are hit first in so many ways. And we're not where I think we should be. For example, the House of Commons, we have 36% women. Well, 30% women, sorry. The Liberal caucus, we have 36% women. The Conservative caucus, only about 16 or 17%.
Well, they're not interested in moving forward. They're interested in moving back. And
they're certainly not interested in supporting women, Jane. No. We saw that happen in our riding.
Yeah.
The nomination for the Conservatives. It was very, very apparent.
And I'm just lucky I get to work for a progressive woman like yourself who, is trying to move the needle forward. And along with the great cabinet ministers and MPs we've met on the Hill who are doing the same thing. So what's a typical day for you in Ottawa? What does it look like? Because you work like 22 hours a day. And I think, judging from your parents, you learned that hard work. My grandfather used to have a saying, if you never do more than you're paid for, you'll never be paid for more than you do. And it
Right.
starts with, those roots. So tell us what a typical day in Ottawa is like.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a typical day, but the types of things I do during the day. Let me see if I can describe maybe a typical day. So, there's always committee work or housework. So I have two committees I sit on, standing committees. One is on the environment, one is on agriculture. Both of those committees meet twice a week for 2 hours. But there's preparation for the committees because we get lots of submissions. We have witnesses coming. You have to study. The bills come there from the House. We have to. It's actually where the real work, I think, in some respects, is done, and it's very serious. It's you're talking to experts. You're trying to figure out what is the best way forward for the country in these areas. And for me, both agriculture and environment. My mother's family was in and a lot of them are still in the agricultural sector. Food security, sustainable food. I think it's a national security issue, Jane. We've seen the run-up in prices on food. We need to do things in Canada to ensure that we supply our own food and that it's sustainable and affordable. Anyway, so in committee, you do a lot of this work about studying issues, studying bills, trying to think out how to put together recommendations to the government, good legislation. Unfortunately, it's become a bit of a political playground these days, but that's for another time. But so I may get up. There could either be an early meeting, a breakfast maybe starting at 7:30 or 8, or there could be an early caucus meeting or a pre-committee meeting. Maybe do that for an hour. I try to run into the office before I go to the House generally, or before I go to committee. I have a great team there. Get briefed. I have an intern, actually, lucky to have an intern, Jen Jagger, who does a lot of work on background on witnesses. Mohi works on a lot of the issues around this, so get prepped on that. But also, we might have slated at that same time a couple of meetings with stakeholders. So it could either be by Zoom or on telephone with people back in the riding. Or, for example, we had one with a business called Green Bowls Food just recently. Where I'm talking about how this business, the owners the founders are in Aurora, how this business, how can we can help them get connected with other organizations, how this business can grow. It's a great opportunity. And then it might go to a stakeholder like the Canadian Federation of Independent Business that will come into my office. They're based in Ottawa. They'll talk to me more broadly about what small businesses need. Yeah. And then I'll run from there over to committee, try and get there on time, sit down, take my coat off, and then we're listening to witnesses, we're asking questions, we're working on policy and perhaps bills. Generally, we have grabbed something to eat there at committee or in the House.
So when you've been talking about the House, I think sometimes when we get calls in the office, we say, "Oh, Leah's, the House is sitting." And for some people that are just learning about politics, some people that are coming to our country that are in our riding that may not know, can you sort of expand? What is the House?
Sure. The House, when I refer to the House, it's the House of Commons, and that's actually the physical place and the people, and which a lot of support, again, the officers of the House, the Speaker of the House, the clerks of the table. It's very formal, Jane. Our system is based on a Westminster system, basically hundreds of years old, and we still maintain that, which I have a bit of an issue with. I think we need some election reform. So it's a place where there are certain rules and procedures. Parliamentary privilege applies. But when you're in the House, you have to follow those procedures and rules. And in-house, there's many different things that happen. I can present petitions on behalf of constituents, which I do. But usually the biggest thing there is debate about bills or about questions of privilege or something that's going on. So we have debate. I often will speak on issues. We can get up and ask questions of people who have made speeches. We just, committee reports will be presented there to the government. We have ministers stand up to make statements. We have a chance as members of Parliament to stand up and make brief statements. They're called SO31s, 1-minute statements, about something that has been brought up just to the riding or something that's happened, commending somebody, bringing something forward. So we have a chance to participate in that way if we're not giving a speech. So that is a very important place. It's also where votes take place, Jane.
Yes.
Votes. And those are very important as a parliamentarian. You cannot miss a vote. And especially now since we're in a minority government situation. So that is all the kind of structure and rigor of I would say, the body of government that is the most important body in Canada.
And it's open to the public.
It is.
So anybody from our constituents that would like to come and get not so much tickets but access to the house. I think that's one thing that's amazing about our parliamentary system is that people get to see this in action.
Yeah.
And they get to see everybody in action in the house.
Absolutely. And you can also watch it on TV, on CPAC. You can go online, Parleview. But, if anybody listening wants to come to the house and watch what we do, please contact our office.
Right.
I mean, contact our office. We're happy to help you arrange a visit, a tour. I'll meet with you if I can, if my schedule allows. Like, one of my favorite things to do is meet with people in Ottawa, constituents, and show you around a bit. But please, we have a very open government system in that respect. The other thing I didn't mention, Jane, is question period. Most of what people see of our government on TV would be around question period. And that is a time where it's usually a bit of theatrics because, quite frankly, it's trying to get press attention, trying to be outrageous a little bit, and it's actually devolved a lot. I'm actually quite upset with the behavior of certain members of Parliament right now and the way things are going because we've lost respect, not just for people but for institutions and for the House of Commons, for the Speaker. And I think as leaders, we're modeling for the rest of the country, and we saw what happened in the United States when, Donald Trump was elected. He was democratically elected, and he was, the person who was brought in by people. But leadership matters, and the example that we put out there as a House of Commons in Canada, it matters. And so I think we have to show respect for one another.
And the way we treat people.
We treat people and the institutions, the media, everything like. It's just humanity. It's how we keep our Canada.
Because it's a very, very tough job. It's you're 22 hours a day. It's stressful.
Well, let me be clear. I need more than 2 hours sleep. Everyone, I sleep more than 2 hours. It's not 20. It could be 22 hours.
But I think
cut it off.
for most people working in politics, you're thinking at nighttime about you've been disrupted. And Leah, you work extremely hard. And not only on the Hill, and a lot of people don't know that you're traveling back, on a train or a plane or by car, and then we're in the riding on the weekends where you're trying to, be at as many activities as you can be and support as many people and nonprofit organizations, and you dropping into small business, and you're meeting constituency, and we're trying to, solve cases. And people would go, why would you do this? There's an election coming up. We all know, we're not sure when. Why, and you want to run again. Why?
Yeah. Well, let me start, Jane, by just backing up a bit because it is hard work. But like I said before, it's a privilege. It's an honor. I feel very privileged to be in this position and to be able to work for the constituents. And I know that there are so many Canadians that work as hard, Jane. Like, people are out there with 2 or 3 jobs right now trying to make ends meet. I know as parents, we have to balance, children. We have to balance sometimes older parents, siblings. We all have so many things that we're working on and that are taking our time. So I'm not unique, I don't think. But
you have 6 children you've been parenting and your parents. So I think you are. But a lot of people, as you say, have families that they need to take care of.
We all work hard. That's what makes Canada great, right? We have a workforce that's amazingly well educated, hardworking. I think we're respectful. We believe in community and helping others. It's amazing. So, but to your question, why keep doing this? And I have to say, I ask myself that some days, Jane, and not because of the work or the amount of work. It's really because of the attitude right now of people. It's become very, very divisive. It's become very toxic in some ways. You can be attacked easily, either in person or people that don't even know me will write nasty things or say terrible things. And I'm like, you don't know me. You don't know me at all. Please get to know me. I'm a person with a life, and I'm working as hard as I can. So you may not like the policies of the government. You may not like certain things, but it doesn't have to become personal. And it has. It's become about attacking people. But having said that, and I look at it, I think, God, I'm really sensitive. I care deeply about everything, and that makes it even harder. But if I don't run again, or if people that are doing this job because they really believe in helping people in community and being a good representative and in putting out the best policy we can, don't run, then what happens? Like, what happens to our parliament? What happens? And we are losing good people, Jane. right now. We
I
are
know.
losing good people because they can't take it anymore. And I just got to the point where I said, I won't, I need to keep doing it. I just can't. And there's so much at stake in this next election, Jane.
Yes, I know. There's so many great programs that I don't think people realize that are in jeopardy if there were to be a change in government. And I think working in your offices, we're fighting every day to make sure that those programs stay in place.
Yeah. So we could go into a lot on that, but that's why I'm doing it. So I'm going to run again. It's a privilege again. I hope that I will have the trust of people. I understand. And the biggest thing for me, Jane, this time is democracy works, I believe, but it relies on information.
Right.
It relies on people actually looking at facts and knowing what they're voting for, not just voting against something. Because when people vote against something, it's like they're walking backwards and you can walk off a cliff. So I'm happy to have an election based on policy, on facts, on my record, on what I've done. But if there's not information out there, like if people don't actually understand what's going on and they're just basing it on slogans and social media clips and things like that, I don't want to be running against misinformation. That's a losing proposition, and that's a losing proposition for our democracy as well. So I'm doing my best, and you all know in my team that we're doing our best to communicate. And one of the reasons for doing the podcast is to try and give people information so they have a basis upon which to make a decision, and that we're trying to break it down so that you can make a decision. And hey, if you decide I'd rather have no childcare than childcare, great. That's your choice, and I respect that totally. But understand what's going to happen. Understand what the choice is. So that's my plea to people. Let's break it down together. And thanks, Jane, for your time this morning.
And thank you, Leah. I've learned a little bit more about you, and I hope our listeners have too.
Thanks for watching the video and the podcast. I hope you'll come back again and that we've been able to break it down a little bit. Please, if you're enjoying it, like it, subscribe to my YouTube channel, MP Leah Taylor Roy. And if you have any feedback or input, let me know. I'm happy to listen to what you have to say, to respond, or to do something on a different topic. So take care, and hopefully we'll see you back at the next episode. And don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, or share on my YouTube channel or my social media. Thanks.